My friends, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Diner Talks with James. I'm James, y'all. We got my boy Ross Szabo coming out here in just a minute, and I'm super pumped for you all to meet him because he is an incredible human being. Before we bring him out, though, y'all, I just want to let you know that I'm still trying to figure out what a name for our people are. What should we be called, listeners? What do you want to be called? You want to be a diner guest, a diner patron? That sounds weird. Should we be the milkshakers? Should we be the omeleters? I don't know. I'm just making random things up at a diner right now, y'all. But I would think it'd be fun if we could come up with a cool name for our community. So if you could do me a favor, head over to Instagram, follow Diner Talks with James, shoot me a DM. You don't even have to follow, but you can just shoot me a DM and let me know what you think we should be called. That would be super helpful, y'all. Always trying to build community on here. All right, y'all. Let's jump into this episode. My guest is a longtime friend of mine. His name is Ross Szabo. Maybe one of the coolest people I know, maybe one of the most influential people that I know, and maybe one of the men with the greatest hearts that I know. He is an award-winning pioneer for the mental health movement. He's been talking about mental health since before it was cool to be depressed and have anxiety. Take that. But honestly, he's really been influential in this movement. It's incredible. He's a former director of the outreach of the National Mental Health Awareness Campaign. He's written 2 books. He's spoken to over 2 million people. He shook President Biden's hand and has the photographic proof to show you. He is an incredible human who also did the Peace Corps in Botswana, because why not do the Peace Corps in Botswana? He's currently serving as the wellness director at the Geffen Academy at UCLA, and he's the CEO of the Human Power Project. More importantly, he is my friend, and he is a man who I have great respect for. He's helped me through some tough times in my own life, and I'm very grateful. I'm super excited for y'all to meet my guy, Ross Szabo. What up, dude?
What's up, man? That's probably the best introduction I've ever had. So thanks, man.
I'll take it. I will take it to the bank. My man, good to see you. Now, normally nowadays, you're out in LA and I'm in Minnesota, like I do. And the only way I see you is on the internet, and typically it is sweaty selfies of you post run. And so it's good to see you not glistening as much right now, my man.
Yeah, no, it feels good to not be running. It's great to just be sitting. It's nice.
One of the greatest quotes that Suzanne Robillata, my mother, has ever said, she said, "James, I just fucking love to sit." And I respect my mom a lot for that.
That's a pretty, could be a bumper sticker right there.
Yeah, that's a power quote right there. Ross, my brother, I'm super excited to see you, man. We are both very busy humans, and so anytime we get some time together, I'm always greatly appreciative of it. You and I have shared a couple of strong meals together, and some great conversations. But Ross, here's how I typically start the conversations off here in the diner: is that I know you're from back east, and that's you can tell by your delightful wit, sarcasm, and sass, and so you're a Pennsylvania boy, and so your way around a diner. Which I also respect about you. What do you have a go-to diner meal when you're back east with the family?
So back in the day, in the late night, we're going to talk about mental health, and you don't become an advocate without some struggles. In my struggle days, I was always a 3 a.m. after the bar circus fries guy. For those of you who don't know what a circus fry is, it is cheese fries with gravy. I don't know what would happen if I tried that now. So I think when I go home, I'm usually a standard breakfast combo dude. Eggs over easy, pancakes, bacon, hash browns, toast, because I like to eat my pancakes without egg on them and use the toast to get the egg.
Sure, yeah.
And
That's
then
a pro tip.
and then a milkshake. You know what I mean? That's my diner kind of go-to meal.
That is a rock star diner move right there. That is well played. I'm here for everything that you just said. I judge people, and one of my best friends does this, and I judge him. And he takes his eggs over easy and slides them on top of his stack of pancakes. He sticks the bacon in between the pancakes and goes to town. That's not how you're supposed to do it.
It's incorrect. It's just incorrect.
That's it.
Also, first time I had my wife, she had not been to a Pennsylvania diner. I got some turkey gravy, which is like a light, I don't know, is it fluorescent green? Is it yellow?
there's.
She did not eat the diner turkey gravy. So,
Wow. It's true. It's true that we put our partners through tests, whether we choose to admit it or not, but it's okay if they fail a couple of them. We keep them around anyway. And they stick around, let's be honest, and we're grateful for them. I love that, man. That's awesome. Now, it's interesting because, as a New Yorker, I love to make fun of New Jersey, and then I just never talk about Pennsylvania. And I did not know that the fries that you described are called circus fries in Pennsylvania. Those are called disco fries in Jersey. And it's just called cheese fries with gravy in New York, which isn't fun, and I'll admit that. But I didn't know that they were called circus fries. That's a fun fact.
Yeah. Pennsylvania does a lot right. That's why I moved out when I was 18. And
that's it. You're still a proud Phillies fan, though. Still a Philly sports guy.
No, I'm a Mets fan. I'm a Mets fan. Call me a Phillies fan.
I love messing with you.
How are you going to say we're friends? You're going to say we're friends. You're going to introduce me as a friend and then say I'm a Phillies fan. I don't know.
Well, because that's what friends do. They mess with each other. I appreciate you, brother. Oh man, it's the best because they're in the same league too, which is even more fun. A league, by the way, that no teams are over 500 right now as we currently speak. But anyway, that's fine. That division will get its stuff together. Ross, I appreciate you so much, dude. And the work that you do is incredible. You do pretty much all of your work is devoted to mental health. And so mental health is not one of those fields that, when some kids are saying, I want to be a firefighter, and other people are like, I want to be a race car driver. You're not like, I want to advocate for the mental health of my fellow humans, right? Like that is not, it's not like you weren't that kid in kindergarten. And so I'm curious, what was the original dream when you were younger? What were you going after?
So I was on the hard track of either politics or I wanted to become like a news anchor. That's where I was going. I was my original major in one of my original freshman year was political science. And then when I went back a third time, it was communications.
So nice. He did it thrice.
Yeah. So that was the original goal, politics or news.
Okay, there it is. But mental health came into your world. When did your passion switch? When was that in is it college experience, high school? When did that become a thing that you're like, you know what, I need to point the ship at this. This matters, and I'm excited about doing this work.
Well, I had two kind of critical moments. One, I was hospitalized for attempting to take my own life when I was a senior in high school. And at the time, I wasn't on like anyone's radar. I was president of my class and a varsity basketball player and like had the huge college resume everybody would want. But, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder before my junior year and then went into a major depressive episode in my senior year. And when I got out of the psychiatric ward, a lot of things shifted in my school. And I went from being the like cool guy to the guy that was called a psycho and a crazy kid and was made fun of. And so I had a moment in my senior year where I was like, this isn't funny to me. I want to start talking about it. So I actually started speaking publicly about my experiences with bipolar disorder when I was 17. And that was the first critical moment. The second one was when I went back to college at age 22.
Yeah.
This would be the third venture.
Sure.
To college. I looked around and I was like, when I was in high school, we had full school assemblies about drugs and alcohol and drunk driving and sex and all this other stuff, but nobody ever had a full school assembly to talk about mental health. And so I researched if anyone was doing it. No one was doing it. And so I started my own nonprofit organization with the goal of creating full school assemblies where you teach people about mental health. And then like from there, it kind of just like the path is wild. You know, it's a very, it escalated quickly. But those are the two most kind of meaningful moments for me.
Yeah. That's powerful, brother. And thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story here with us as well. I know there's so much more depth in there, and it is two extremely powerful moments. The moment in high school, I love the way that you spoke about it, just with the honesty of like, you know, I attempted to commit my life after I left psych ward. I came back, and all of a sudden, I was known as the psycho. And I mean, what a tough time. I mean, that's always a tough thing to be labeled as. But like high school, especially the complete switch from the hotshot varsity basketball player to all of a sudden the quote unquote freak, right? Like, I mean, what a powerful switch to have to undertake. And I don't know if a lot of people go through something like that and come out of it with, we need to talk about this. I think a lot of people go through that and come out of it feeling worse and maybe reattempting taking their life or spiraling down or running or leaving town or whatever it is. I mean, at least at a minimum, transferring schools, right? Where do you think your, I don't know, fortitude came from, or your stubbornness, or I don't even know what word you would talk about to describe it in that moment, that you're like, no, we need to talk about this.
I have a pretty weird biological combination of not picking up on like social cues and also just being really linear, I will say. My wife still is like, you know, the best story, she was at this like party she really loved, and she texted me and was like, hey, can you pick me up, right? And then like 9 minutes later I was like, I'm outside, and she was like, no, I wasn't asking you to come now. I was asking like
in general.
Can you pick me up? I think that there was definitely, look, my childhood environment was difficult for many reasons that were no fault, were mainly biological problems. But I do think that there was an element in my family that was like, you do what's right, and you fight for what's right. And at the time in high school, like, everyone who was calling me a psycho was drinking as much as I was driving as drunk as much as I was as destructive as I was. But my thing had a name. And so the judgment came from the label. And, you know, I visited my oldest brother in a psychiatric ward when I was 11. So I didn't see this as an issue that had as much stigma because I had been around it since I was a kid. And true to form, when I shared my story publicly in high school, everyone else shared their story. So unintentionally, I learned at a young age, like, hey, if you share your story, it opens other people to sharing their stories.
Yeah, right. That vulnerability begets vulnerability kind of moment for sure. And I also grew up in a household that stressed doing the right thing, right? Like my father was big on respect and taking care of each other and making sure, especially of elders. And then also, I also grew up in a house they were extremely civically engaged. My mom was the president of every society in my hometown, the historical society, the garden club, the civics association, right? Like my mom was a full-time volunteer, and it was an incredible human, but did it not for any shine. She wasn't like, I got to get in the newspaper, right? Like it was never anything. It was just, you just do the right thing, right? There is an issue. People ask your help, you show up. When people ask for help, you help them. And so doing the right thing was always a really powerful through line in my childhood as well. And I think there is something to coming from a household like that. I'm wondering, are there any lessons that you remember, parents or somebody else who took care of you when you were younger? Are there any lessons that still stick with you today from that, like, just do the right thing kind of period?
My dad was always honest. He was an insurance salesman my entire life. He started the year I was born, and he just had a really good ability to connect with other people in a way that they trusted him. And my dad was an emotional man who always showed up. It didn't matter what was happening. He would show up. He would be there for everyone. And so I think seeing that as an example of what being a man could mean was helpful. I think, I also got rewarded. I could have told that story in high school and had it backfire in like an epic way and then been like, oh man, I'm never going to do this again. Right. But there was a male teacher who also rewarded it. It was like, keep coming back, keep sharing your story. I believe in you. I care about you. So I think those kind of role models were really beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. Some of those individuals that there's one individuals that kind of come by the swing that you're on and give you another push, right? Just like, keep going. You're doing the right thing. I love that, man. I love that. It's funny because in high school, in middle school and high school is when I got into some really dark thoughts as well. I repeatedly had thoughts about like, well, no one's going to come to my funeral. And like, I had a lot of reoccurring dreams of me. My funeral was just my parents and my brothers. And they were just kind of like, they weren't really paying a lot of attention, and there was nobody else at my funeral. I was like, nobody cares, right? No one cares about you. You're alone. No one would miss you. No one would. And I'm fortunate that that's as dark as the thoughts got. I never came up with the plan of removing myself or anything like that. And I feel fortunate that for whatever reason, it never got that dark, but it didn't. But I definitely had a lot of thoughts of like, if I wasn't around, nobody would notice. It's interesting because in those moments, I didn't know who to turn to or what to turn to. And there wasn't anything, Sesame Street told me to love myself, but I didn't really know what that meant. Right. There's no knowledge, right? One thing that, when we were just talking before, you were talking before we got on air, you said, in schools, and especially elementary schools or middle school, right? There's PE, physical education, but there's no ME, there's no mental education, or mental health education and whatnot. And I know that I would have benefited from that, right? Like my sense of self-worth, that I still struggle with today, I can pinpoint back to those handful of years where I believed what was said about me, what was said to me. And I let those thoughts in, and I didn't try to rewrite them. Instead, I believed them and held on to them and accepted them as truth. And I still battle unlearning some of those things today, 20, 25, 30 years later. Right. And so there is so much power in knowledge, but yet that knowledge is not something that we are giving kids today yet. That's something that you have now kind of shifted the game on a little bit at the Geffen Academy. But I'm curious, why do you think, let's talk about first, why don't we teach those things more frequently and more head on to kids?
Well, I think what has happened in a lot of schools is the question has turned to what will the school do? And schools feel pressured to fill the role of parenting, fill the role of everything for a kid. And the reality, at least what I've seen, is there is at least one person in every school who does want to help kids with their emotions and their mental health, but we haven't found a systemized way to really teach it. So the barriers are having space in a school schedule, having someone who could teach it, and then also what to teach, right? So those are the biggest barriers. What we're doing at my school is we have a class where kids learn about their mental health once a week, every week, from grade 6 through 12. And you can't teach about mental health without talking about the systems that destroy it. So we also have to talk about systemic racism, the patriarchy, the college application process, which it doesn't matter if you tell kids not to stress out, that process, it's designed to harm them.
Crazy. Yeah.
Right. And then we do a lot of work on healthy relationships, healthy sexuality, identity, gender, sexual orientation, all of those things. So, for me at least, we're in a position where we can approach education about everything that affects mental health. But I would say that most schools are in a position where they could do the basics. And that's our goal. This summer, we're doing a Mental Health Teacher Training Institute where we're going to start teaching other trainers teaching other teachers how to do what we do.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful. I'm wondering, first off, the fact that you all talk about it once a week is incredible. And yes, you can't just start to talk about mental health and just be like, everybody needs to feel better. And here's maybe why you feel sad, and point at the chart of which smile you are, right? You can't, those things are all fine entry points, but that's not where we stop. And I love that you all have take on the courageous approach of we got to talk about the systems that got some of us here, or mainly all of us in some way, shape, or form. And even if we are privileged and that we benefit, like myself, right, benefit from the patriarchy, it doesn't mean I'm not still affected by it in some mental way, and it doesn't affect me. We'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about male friendships and mental health in men in particular. But the idea that we could take one class, 1 hour a week and talk about it and starting it at 6th grade or younger, or where at any point, let us start, because currently there's no starting, is beautiful. So I guess a question for you is that, what does some of that training look like? What are you teaching these individuals about, as far as, because I think even just learning about some of that knowledge, I could, and listeners could start to think about oh, I've never thought about something in that way. Or it's almost like in what you're teaching these teachers to do are also things that we as regular fellow solo beings could also start to put into use.
Yeah. And first off, just to reinforce your point, we have to stop telling teenagers that they have to have their mental health figured out. It's not realistic. Adults don't have their mental health figured out. So it's not about having perfectly balanced stress and getting sleep perfectly every night and being able to communicate and everything else. It's about learning small skills that you can build during that second largest period of brain growth that you can continue to attempt to help balance your mental health throughout life. And that is, I think, one of the most important messages we can give. If we hold anyone to the standard of you have to have your mental health figured out, until we actually take down the systems that damage our mental health, all of them, we can't keep saying that you have to have your mental health figured out.
Right.
Beyond that, there are a couple of things that people can do. They can use a common language around mental health that compares mental health to physical health, that normalizes mental health instead of isolating mental illness. So, like, for example, when you think about physical health, the messaging you get is you do not need to eat healthily until you get diabetes. Like, we're pretty proactive in saying eat healthy, exercise. If you get diabetes or something else, here's how you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But if you think about mental health, the way we frame it a lot of times is you should seek help once you have a problem. And it's not preventative or proactive. Like, you don't wait until you have a physical health disorder to go to the gym. You go there preventatively.
I do that with the dentist, though. With the dentist, I kind of do that, though. I'm not supposed to. I know I'm not, Ross. You can yell at me.
No, it's true. We, especially as men, do it with doctors, but we don't do it when it comes to physical health. And if we do, we at least know that if we went to the gym, we wouldn't be judged for exercising in the same way that people can be judged for expressing their feelings or their mental health. So just from a baseline, people need to have a common language and definition around mental health, how we talk about it. You know the difference between a sprained ankle and a broken leg, but very few people know the difference between stress and an anxiety disorder or a breakup and clinical depression. So the language, the baseline elements that we use is something every school could do. Beyond that, the number one way to lessen stigma from an evidence-based perspective is when people with mental health issues share their stories. Mm-hmm. So what we're really going to hone in on in the training is empowering teachers to learn how to safely tell their personal stories and experiences with mental health, not only safe for them so that they can manage it, but also safe for the audience to hear it. And that is, a little bit more complex.
Yeah, just a little bit for sure. Yeah. I first off, I love the idea of trying to come up with common language. I literally have never thought about what you just spoke on as far as, we don't tell people like eat whatever the hell you want till you get diabetes, right? Like it's a proactive approach. And you're right. We're not currently being proactive about mental health. And so that was a really cool, astute point. And it's, as we start to talk about mental health, it also goes back to what you were sharing earlier, where it's like once you started sharing your story, other people started sharing their stories, and we normalized it. We realized that maybe we're okay, maybe we're right, or maybe there is no such thing as normal. And so, but sharing those stories is very important. But as you just alluded to, there's a way to do it, right? This phrase of trauma dumping. We can't just come in here. And I mean, Brene Brown talks a lot about that. Vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability isn't good, right? And just coming out and being like, here's everything that happened to me. I'm vulnerable. Look at me go, right? Like that's not vulnerable. Right. And there's a big, in the professional speaking world, they talk a lot about share from your scars, not your wounds, and things like that. And I think there's a little bit of give and take in that theory as well. But, I'm curious to hear, as you think about this, and as even, parents that are listening to this or partners that are listening to this, there's so many places where we can share our story and help the person across the diner table from us feel a little bit more normal or a little bit okay, or that they can share. How do you recommend individuals share their stories, or when to share their stories?
Yeah. And so let me draw a difference between, if you're in a classroom, your approach should be a public health approach.
Yeah.
Where you are trying to educate people. If you're in a relationship or a friendship or a family, you should still have some of those elements, but like that's where you need to lower the walls a little bit to connect. The most dangerous things I see happen in a classroom is somebody is sharing therapeutic information with students who are not set up to handle that, right? And so here are the tips. I know people, we like bullet points. Here are the bullet points. Choose a story that you have already processed. That's my language. So do not be in a classroom sharing a story for the first time. Choose a story that you have already processed, that you are comfortable with, that no matter what their reaction is, it will not affect you. Okay? That's the first part, right? The second part is choose a story that is relevant to the lesson you are teaching. So like if I'm teaching a lesson about drug and alcohol prevention, then I can share like, hey, I started drinking when I was 12 because I went through a lot of trauma. There was heavy addiction in my family. I used it as a coping mechanism. It destroyed my adolescent life. I was able to find other coping mechanisms. That is very different than me trying to be cool and being like, oh, you guys drink? I drank a lot. I won a lot of drinking competitions. I used to drink in the woods. I used to drink in my van. One time I got so messed up, don't even remember things. Like, not relevant to what you're teaching, right? And then there's many other parts. Another part is don't share your story for validation in your classroom. If you are seeking validation from your students, they are not your students anymore. If you need validation from them, then you have crossed a boundary that is going to make them think they need to take care of you, or make you feel like you constantly need their approval, which is not going to work, especially from a public health setting. I could keep going if you want me to, but
that's one of the reasons. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I couldn't be a high school teacher, is because I desperately needed validation from them and they weren't giving it to me. And I was like, this is not healthy for my self-esteem. Right? Like, I mean,
are you being serious?
I'm being 100%. I got in the I got in the classroom, right? I have a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology. Around my junior year, my teachers are like, "You're putting too many jokes in your scientific papers. This may not be for you." And I was like, "I think you're right." And so I was like, "All right, well, now what am I going to do?" I'm in my junior year. I still like science, but I don't want to write research papers for the rest of my life. And so what am I going to do with this degree? And my GPA is mediocre at best at a 2.73. And so like, where am I actually going right now? I was like, oh, I could become a teacher. I had a lot of great teachers. And maybe I could be a teacher because, maybe I don't want to do all the research, but I can get other people excited about it and drive their passion. And so I was like, all right, let me take the education classes. And I started taking those classes, got into some classrooms, taught some lessons. And I was like, oh, this is real hard. I am not good at this. And you are not laughing at my puns, which deserve laughter because they're gold. And so, yeah, but no, truth be told, I was like, I'm not getting a sense of validation from this moment. And people who really need validation shouldn't become teachers. And so I was like, this isn't the right path for me. So that is 100% true story.
Yeah. And I mean, your honesty is great. I think there are a lot of teachers in society who need that validation from their students, and it's just not a healthy dynamic. It's definitely not a healthy dynamic if you're going to talk about health. You need to be vulnerable with boundaries, and that's a really critical piece of the training. But I think those elements of, have you processed it? Is it relevant to the lesson you're teaching?
No.
Are you putting up enough boundaries to protect yourself and the students? And, how do you incorporate that in a lesson? I think what I've also seen too is like, there are millions of teachers out there who had a good life and, bless them, but they can also share the stories of their friends or their families or like other things they've gone through, but it does need some guidance.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's not, it is a skill worth practicing. For sure. Don't just get in there and start and be like, all right, let's give this a shot. I went to a seminar over the summer taught by an attractive man. Here we go. Right? Like it's it is a skill worth practicing.
But here's the reality. Like, what schools lack is that human connection. And so they do need to connect to something. It's just what do they connect to, and how does it benefit the overall educational goals? Now that we've done this for 4 years, and I've watched my ninth graders, we're having our first graduating class, I can see, the major benefits and the challenges, and, kind of a much deeper understanding than I would have ever had if I didn't teach in a school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. People love to tell teachers how they should do their jobs if they never taught anything, right? Like, I think the big joke at the beginning and throughout the pandemic was like, we don't pay teachers enough. Now that everybody's homeschooling their kids and seeing the teachers and like listening to class on the Zoom or whatever, right? It's finally. I don't think anything's necessarily changing for that. I don't know if people are voting any differently. Sadly, but still, it is definitely a profession that takes a ton of skill, and you don't know it until you actually get in the classroom, for sure. I know my respect for teachers immediately went up during that semester that I taught a bunch of classes to those poor high school students in North Carolina, and I was like, wow, this is way harder than it looks.
Yeah, and I think that's something else that needs to be mentioned. Currently, you keep seeing memes and all these things around the country saying like, well, kids need a class where they learn about their mental health like they would learn about their physical health. And that is a very idealistic situation. It is not easy because it's assuming that kids want that class, that they would trust the students in the class to have that class, and that we would have educators who can teach it. And so, I think we're getting there, but it's much easier to say than to actually do. And even for me, for someone who had spent my entire life educating people about mental health, creating an actual class to do it once a week it's a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Another course that they always say that kids should be taught is around financial literacy, right? And that is a way straighter line, right? Like that is like, we can teach those skills a lot easier. We can set that class up a lot quicker than a mental health education class, for sure. I agree with you, man. I agree. So I want to take it out of the classroom setting for a minute. I think I want to come back to the question of, when we are having conversations with people that we love, that we see that are struggling, or potentially the patterns that they normally are in, they're out, their routines are whacked, because they're going through something, right? Whether it's a funk, whether it's an episode, whether it's a break, whether it's who knows, right? And no one knows. But there is still a lot of power in sharing our stories in those moments, in relationships and in and amongst friends and stuff like that. And one area where I don't see this nearly enough is with male friendships, and men's relationships with each other. Men are men, I think we're getting better, but I think men in general are taught to be internal processors. Right. The thing is that men are taught not to feel. I don't necessarily know if that is exactly it. It is in some cases, but I think men are taught to be internal processors, right? You figure it out. You don't present complaints. You present solutions. You don't present a process. You present a product, right? And I think that is hurting men a lot. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on men and mental health. Do you see progress being made? And I'd just be curious to have a conversation with that a little bit about you. Nope. With that, a little bit with you.
No, I completely agree. I think what happens is you grow up as a little boy and you get told that you can feel, that you can cry. Like that happens for a majority of kids. And then you get to be around age 11 or 12, and you see that if you cry, it has consequences. Like that stage of development in middle school for most boys is the first time where you're like, oh, you said it was okay to cry, but now they're making fun of me, or no one's talking to me, or you're not hugging me. And I think that's where that internal process starts, James. I think once you see how society is treating you for those emotions, you start thinking like, oh, well, then I gotta figure this out on my own because I don't know who I can trust. And it is also around the same time where a young boy's trust is broken, either by friends, somebody like, told someone you did something, or by, you start dating, something happens. And so that time period between ages of 12 and 25 is when most people develop coping mechanisms, communication skills, internal voice for life. I often joke with people that being an adult is just trying to undo adolescence. Like you're just like, oh yeah, no, I started this pattern when I was 18 and now I'm 40 and I still do the exact same thing. And so, I think that it's certainly getting better that we are promoting men and young men expressing themselves through that time period and not judging them as much. Mm-hmm. But it's not perfect, and there's still a lot of space for that to grow. I do think adult men are I think men of all ages are struggling. The highest suicide rate is white males over the age of 45 in this country. And the suicide rate for young men is usually 6 times the rate of young women at all ages. But our highest suicide rates are adults, not kids. We talk about kids and we try to prevent suicide in kids, but they have one of the lowest actual rates of suicide of all ages. And so I think it's going to require a lot of different effort and steps to normalize males talking about their feelings. I don't agree with people who say they don't know how. I think it's more of an issue of there's situations where they're comfortable and they're not. And most men are comfortable expressing emotion at a wedding, a funeral, and then like at a sporting event. Mm-hmm. But when it's intimate, one-on-one, or, in a relationship, it doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are, like that, that's where it's harder. That's where it seems to kind of get shut down.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. In those moments. And those are arguably the more important moments. I mean, yeah, sure. Feel what you're feeling when you're at a wedding or at a sporting event or whatnot. I mean, I punched a wall when the Yankees lost a series. I'm not proud. But the thing is that the wall won, by the way, for the record. The wall definitely won.
It usually does. It usually does.
Yeah, that's it. That was the first and last time. Well, yeah, I think so. But that is beautifully put. And so those moments that we try to have conversations with each other, I think these are moments where I'm fortunate that I have a friend group from home, and there's 5 or 6 of us, and we've been pretty open and honest with some of the things that we're dealing with, right? And one of my buddies came out and said, "Hey, we just found out my son's got autism, and another one's got a kid with this, and another kid with that, or they themselves are struggling with X, Y, and Z," and we have built this kind of beautiful relationship amongst a group of men, but I don't think that happens in every friend group, right? And I love what you put earlier where, I like to say that I was taught to be kind to everybody else at a very young age, and I was taught to be kind to myself around the age of 35, right? And so that's 30 years of unlearning I'm trying to do, like you mentioned. We're trying to unpack our adolescence as an adult. I wonder, how do you think those conversations can start? I mean, you started them, You started conversations like that with others from a young age, but like, what does it take? And this is, I mean, it's not just a male problem, because I mean, women have been known to have very surface level conversations with each other as well, where the tone gets higher and higher. I know, right? I know, right? I'm fine. And so, like, you know, we've been a part of those conversations as men and women, and non-binary folks. And so the thing is that what does it look like to have a relationship that you can start that conversation? Like, I mean, who's supposed to make the first move? What's supposed to happen? Like, because we're also taught that vulnerability can push each other. Like, I was taught by my counselor, there's a friend of mine who recently hurt me, and I wanted to kind of come out and be like, listen, this happened, and here's the story I'm telling myself, and I wanted to hit with the I statements and whatnot. And she was like, I don't know if your friendship's there yet. She's like, and so maybe don't come with all that vulnerability because that may push them away further. And I'm like, this is so confusing, right? And so I'd be curious to hear some of your thoughts on that, of like, what does initiating those conversations or getting more comfortable with having those conversations look like?
Well, you know, it starts with, what do you want to connect around, you know? Mm-hmm. And for a lot of guys, the reason it's easy to keep friendship surface level is because most male friendships are revolving around making fun of each other, or, you know, kind of burning each other, or doing external things. But we do. It's doing external things. It's watching a game, or playing a sport, or doing something like that. I think that you can't make people do something they don't want to do. And you'd have to connect with someone to say, like, well, what do you want someone to know about you? Like, I have gender conversations with my high school students, and we separate students who identify as male, students who identify as female, students who identify as non-binary. And then we just have conversations about like what's going on. And that process of guys having their friendship revolve around roasting each other starts in middle school. It's just like a natural process. So there has to be an impetus. Like, I want to connect further. I want to share what's going on with me. How you do that is going to be different for every person. Yeah. But because the stereotype of guys wanting to fix things, or like addressing it quicker, when guys do bring up those emotions, if they do have that strength, if they do have that desire, it does tend to build connections in their friendships even further. But I think the question of how is not as important as the question as why and what are you trying to do. And there are a lot of guys out there who don't know the answers to that. Yeah. And their friendships, or their communication in that friendship, is going to be even more complicated because they're not sure what they want. And there's many ways to do it. There's many ways to answer the how, but there's a deeper aspect in there that doesn't get addressed from that shell, from that I'm going to shut down now perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The walls are going up. No. Yeah.
Right. So I could give you a meme version. You know what I mean? I could be like, identify what you want to talk about, and then find someone you trust, and then tell it in a chronological order, and then, you know, express your emotions about the event. And that can be extremely successful. And I'm not mocking it by saying it's like in that voice. Yeah. But I just think a lot of guys don't know where to begin. And then they tend to begin when it's at a breaking point. And unfortunately, for a lot of guys, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. And at that point, we've also gotten so good at diving into our coping mechanisms, whether they are good or bad. That sometimes we're so deep into those coping mechanisms that we don't know how to get out of it, and we don't know another way, and we only see one way. And yeah, are we? you've done more research on this than I have. Are we seeing any shift in those numbers for suicide rates, or like are they as far as the numbers of men that are doing it? Is it less? Is it more? Is it similar to what the way it's always been? Is it a flat graph?
There are more men seeking help now than there ever have been before. The suicide rate in this country continues to climb. Yeah. We don't know if that is because now that suicide is more aware, people are actually being honest about how people died. We don't know if it's going up because of forces that are out of the control of a PSA, you know? There's more suicide awareness campaigns today than there ever has been, and the suicide rate is higher. But there's so many other factors that go into that. Like, look, there are more campaigns about obesity and, diabetes than ever before. But obesity and diabetes are at the highest rates ever. And you can't point to that and say, like, that's because there's no public health campaign. Like, diabetes and obesity have so many other factors that play into it that you can't just say, like, oh, we haven't done a good enough job educating people. It's the same thing with mental health. Like, the biology, the environment, the socioeconomic status, all of those things are huge in mental health statistics. And so I don't look at the statistics around suicide as being like the ultimate measure of if men are talking about their emotions more. Right. I think more men seeking help is a positive step. There are many steps in this staircase.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is huge. I mean, we see more celebrities talking about it as well. I mean, social media itself is a place where people are talking about it more because, I mean, sometimes it's easier to yell into the abyss than it is to tell a friend and whatnot. And so it is slowly becoming more normalized. And I agree. And I appreciate the subtle pushback that the suicide numbers aren't necessarily what matters, but what matters more is how many people are seeking help. I'm not saying that those numbers don't matter, but you know what I mean? And so, of course. Yeah, that's powerful. So Ross, I this conversation is one that I wish more men would have. Right. And talking about it. And I also really respect the pushback of it's not necessarily the why that matters. It's sometimes it's the how, or sometimes the when, and some the what, right, that matters as well. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we know about men is frequently what is said is that, men like to have conversations shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. And some of the deepest conversations I've had with fellow men are, on a long drive and kind of in those moments. Or, if we are sharing a cigar, it's not like we're sitting across from each other, blowing smoke at one another, right? Like we're figuring out which way the wind's going, and we're sitting in a way so that we're not getting it on each other and we're not necessarily facing each other. And there are some ways to create environments that do make some individuals feel a little bit more comfortable. And sometimes it's just asking the next question, right? A lot of times where, someone hits you with the I'm fine. You're like, all right, they're fine. Here we go. Keep them moving over here. What do you think about the game? Right. But instead, sometimes it's the courage of asking one more question, or just getting a little bit deeper just to see. Right. And I feel that a lot of times for me, when I think about when I share or don't share, a lot of it has to do with, am I about to burden this person or not? Right? Like should I just carry something? And like, you got yourself into it. You got to get yourself out of it. Don't burden them. Right. And don't bring them into your thing, or wait a little bit until you're a little bit further and you can present more of a solution, or here's what I'm going to do, as opposed to in that moment of like, I'm kind of lost, I'm flailing, and I don't know what to do. Right. Like in those moments, I feel like I'm putting it on to somebody and making them carry my shit. And that fear of being a burden, I think, is a fear that is not uncommon. And I don't know how to get individuals to to recognize that your great friends never see you as a burden. Right? They see it as a privilege that they get to spend time with you. And so like they want to be there with you. They've invested the time, and this is another way that they can invest in you. But a lot of times friendships don't get there. Like you said, like a lot of male friendships are they're about the thing. They're not about the individuals or the person. Are you noticing that as well? And kind of that fear of being a burden in many?
Yeah, and that has become one of the biggest reasons that like young people share that they don't talk about their mental health of all genders. They're like, I don't want to burden anyone. Everyone's going through something. Yeah. I think the step for men in general just has to be, kind of identifying or thinking about what you would want to hear from your own friend. Like if your friend shared with you that they were going through a divorce, or that they don't know how to take care of their kids, or that they are really worried, or that, that they miss people, you wouldn't be like, yo, man, that's too much. I can't hear that right now. That is a burden. Yeah. So I think like a good check is, would I be burdened if my friend told me this? Mm-hmm. And chances are, you wouldn't. And so it is that like kind of self-compassion piece. Like, how can I treat myself more like a friend? How can I understand that, my friends can handle things, and I'm not overwhelming them? Because it is hard to know. It's hard to have insight. It's hard to be sure, especially if you've never talked about emotion and now you're trying it. It's all brand new, but it is a good check in with yourself to be like, okay, how would I react if my friend was going through a rough time? I'd want to know. I'd want to be able to support them.
Yeah, that's a great check. If I was able to, do that more times, and I'm going back through periods of my life where it's like, yeah, I really wish I asked myself that question, because there are times where I needlessly carried things. I mean, I did that, as you know, you and I had a really powerful conversation as I was going through my divorce. And that was a lot of it was that I was just carrying it because I didn't have a solution. I didn't have anything. It was just something that was wrong, and I couldn't talk about it. So I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to, if it was nothing, I didn't want to make it something and whatnot. But it turns out it's something. It's always something, as much as we try to tell ourselves it's not, right? And so in that moment, I wonder if I had those kind of conversations with folks where, if they were going to tell me this, how would I feel about it? Right? Would I feel like they were burdening me or not? I wonder if I would have talked to some more folks. I really love that reframe. That's incredible.
Well, and look, I think the main reasons men don't talk about emotions are they feel embarrassed, they feel ashamed, they feel weak, they feel stupid, they feel like their problems should just go away on their own. They don't want to burden other people. Like you said, they don't know who they can trust. And, all of those barriers have different ways to get broken down or reworked or done differently. And I think one of the most powerful things we can do is compare mental health to physical health and normalize mental health for men and help break down those barriers from a younger age. The reality is the patriarchy doesn't benefit men either. And we're in a place where it's strange because you're like, you do benefit from this patriarchy, but you also have emotional pain, and we need to make you more comfortable expressing that emotional pain in this system. And it's layered. It's not as easy as like, you have feelings, talk about them. It's really layered.
Mm-hmm. As Macklemore once wisely said, there's layers to the shit, player. Tiramisu. Ross Szabo is actually a huge Macklemore fan. That's a fun fact about him that he doesn't like to admit publicly.
I was like, we're quoting Macklemore. Where is the? Oh, there is a leave studio button. There is a leave studio. It's just a button. Shoot. I don't even have to get up. I can just leave studio.
Yeah.
My soul left the second you mentioned Macklemore. My physical body was still here, but my physical body could leave with the leave studio button. Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew?
There it is. There it is. We keep options here in the diner. Eject buttons for all. Ross, this is such a powerful conversation, and I really appreciate you having it. And it's also interesting because it is a serious conversation. It's a serious matter, but I also think, and this is something that you do really well on stage at doing, but I also think we need to figure out a way to talk about it with levity. Because I think that's another way to bring more folks into the conversation. It always feels like as soon as we bring up anything, it's like, all right, well, hang on a second. We got to shift our tone and lean in, right? Like there is power and humor in everything, right? Humor lowers our walls. And that's why, I mean, I'm always grateful for comedians for saying things that other people feel. And sure, there's some times where they cross the line, but they get people talking, right? And they start conversations. And I think there's a place for humor in mental health conversations. It is one that is not a line that we should flood and cross over all the time. But I think there has to be a place for us to laugh. And it's laughter is where joy is, and joy is a beautiful emotion for us to feel. And one of my favorite quotes is from the wise old sage Anonymous. And Anonymous says that happiness is a place that you can visit, and the smartest people go there often, right? But happiness is only a place that you can visit, and the smartest people go there often. And so finding laughter in a lot of these conversations is important. And so, and you do a really great job at that, like I mentioned from the stage, but I understand why we come into it with the weight that we do, because it deserves the weight, but it also deserves levity. And I don't know where that balance falls and how we have that conversation, right? As you're talking about teaching, teachers, training trainers about this, as we talk about men wanting to have conversations with other men, it's like, do we go back to bashing each other? But they're like, yeah, but not really, bro. You good, right? Like, there's something in there, and I don't know the role that humor can play, but I feel like it has to play a role. What do you think?
I think humor helps disarm people, helps them feel more comfortable. And, unfortunately, a lot of guys are only comfortable talking about emotion when their walls have been broken down, which happens when they're drunk or high or something like that, right? And the humor element is great as long as you're laughing, with someone, not at the expense of them. So there have been many times where I've been with dudes where I've expressed a lot of emotions and kind of laughed at myself or laughed at the situation, but not lost my dignity or pride in it. And the roasting each other relationship that men have with each other often, can escalate quickly and kind of diminish the meaningful emotion that was expressed. And so, man, it's tough to kind of walk that line. But in my presentation, when I make jokes, it's often self-deprecating in a way that doesn't diminish my story. Yeah. And I think that's a important element.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, self-deprecation is an art form in order to use it productively, and most people do not. And I know for a very long time, and still to this day, from time to time, do not use it productively. And I'm not getting laughs; I'm getting groans, and it's making everybody a little more uncomfortable. And so,
And now as a dad, when Rome gets older, like he'll just hold on to all of it. I always am amazed at what men have held on to from what their dads have said. And that the dad doesn't remember ever saying it, but it's like the crutch that the son bears forever. And like the dad probably was just like passing by and slightly mentioned something. And the kid was like, I will avenge you.
Yeah. Yes. Right? Yeah, exactly. I have a really
dad, like, you know,
Mhm.
yeah,
I was
and then
gonna say,
later the dad
go ahead,
just
do it.
go on. And then later, you bring it back up to your dad, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, this is all I thought about for 15 years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no,
go ahead. You
for
were going to
sure.
say something.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who is who came out to her father a while ago, and the father handled it quite well, with with a good amount of compassion, and then at the end of the conversation, he was just like, "But just don't ever buzz your hair or cut it real short, right? I don't want you to look like a whatever." And so like that was the line. Despite how compassionate the rest of the conversation was, that was the line that stuck. And my friend wanted to cut their hair for the past however many years, but it's like, well, my dad said this. And like, had to wind up having a conversation. And the dad was like, I didn't, like, that was like a joke at the end of our conversation of just like, or whatnot, but it was something, right? Exactly what you said, where it's like held on to it. And yeah, it is fascinating. And
yeah.
Maybe the most horrifying piece of fatherhood for me, because your boy's quick and witty out here, Ross.
Yeah, quick and witty with dad jokes. The dad jokes are well, and now you're dad, so now they're appropriate.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Now I have an excuse. Before it was just sad. I love it, brother. Ross, I love talking to you, man. And I just appreciate your wisdom and your ability to have conversations about hard things is incredible. And your ability to really simplify it, right? Like I heard about this, these doctoral students over in England. They were chemistry doctoral students. And one of the things they had to do before they were able to pass their defense is that they had to go and talk to a group of fifth graders about why their research mattered. And they had to be able to tell these individuals that, like, these fifth graders, seventh graders, or whatnot, right? Essentially middle schoolers. And they had to tell them why it mattered, and they had to be able to simplify it. And that's how I often feel about the way that you speak about mental health. You make it extremely attainable, approachable, and the way that you pass out tools that anybody can use. And I just really respect the hell out of you for doing that, man, because it is a gift to talk about something this important and that approachable of a nature. And I just wanted to say that I admire you for that, brother.
Well, thanks, man. I really admire you for so many reasons too. Your leadership and your vulnerability and your boldness in being like, hey, we're going to have these conversations. I'm going to start these things. I have this idea. Let's do it. And you have a curiosity about you for human connection and for just survival and life that is a voice that's needed in these times, because spin a wheel, pick an issue, and we are in the heat of it. And so having a platform and creating a platform and marrying up, all of those things are really important skills to have that not a lot of people take the time to do. So your voice and platform and perspective and insights on the world are beyond needed right now.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And that is the only reason I complimented you. So thank you for saying that. And no, brother, I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for kicking it with me in the diner, Ross. I miss the meals that we have not had the opportunity to share like we normally do. I normally see you at least 2-3 times, maybe 4 times a year. And even if it's at some random hotel in Indianapolis, I look forward to them. And brother, I miss you, man. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And thanks for kicking it with me in the diner.
I miss you too, man. Have a good night.
All right, brother. You too. Y'all, that was my man, Ross Szabo, kicking it in the diner. dude dropping truth and also practical ways to start conversations. And can we talk about the work that he is doing impacting the way mental health education could actually become a thing in grade schools in the United States, or maybe even beyond. Incredibly beautiful work from an incredibly beautiful man. No, literally, he's very attractive. Look up a picture of him. Super excited that Ross came through the diner today. And my friends, I'm excited that you joined us as well. Thanks for sliding in the booth and kicking it. And until next time that we connect, my friends, keep punching small talk in the face by asking better questions. You all take care. Be well.